We buy bottled water thinking it's cleaner, purer, better. But what if we've been sold a fantasy? Behind those crisp mountain labels lies one of the most profitable and deceptive marketing campaigns in history. This video unpacks how we came to believe water needed branding, why we pay hundreds of times more for it, and who's really profiting from your thirst. By the end, you may never look at bottled water the same way again. Walk into almost any building, a gym, office, school, airport, and you'll see bottled water. It's everywhere. We buy it without thinking. In fact, the world now consumes over 500 billion bottles of water every year. That's more than 1 million bottles per minute. The industry behind this is massive, worth more than $200 billion annually. And yet, when you step back, the premise is strange. We're paying for something that, in most developed countries, already flows clean and practically free from the tap. This isn't just a habit, it's a cultural norm, reinforced by convenience, marketing, and belief. Bottled water isn't just a drink, it's a symbol, and behind that symbol is one of the most brilliant and deceptive business success stories of our time. Here's the twist most people don't realize. In many cities, tap water is regulated more strictly than bottled water. It's tested more frequently, it travels shorter distances, and it's fresher. But despite the science, there's a perception problem. Tap water is seen as basic, cheap, municipal, maybe even risky. Bottled water, by contrast, is sold as crisp, pristine, and clean. The irony? Much of what we call premium bottled water, like Dasani or Aquafina, is actually just filtered municipal tap, packaged with fancy names and inflated prices. It's not cleaner, it's just better dressed. The difference isn't in the water, it's in the story we're sold, and how completely we've bought into it. Think about what bottled water looks like on the shelf. Ice blue labels, mountain silhouettes, words like glacier, pure, or spring. Everything about the packaging is engineered to create emotional distance from the ordinary. You're not just buying water, you're buying a feeling of nature, health, clarity. The label becomes a portal to some untouched alpine source, even if the actual water came from a tap in New Jersey. This isn't accidental. The industry invests billions in packaging design and brand language that signal status and safety. It's the illusion of purity, bottled. And it works, because what we see on the outside lets us forget what's actually inside. The bottled water boom didn't start with health. It started with luxury. In 1977, Perrier launched a bold marketing campaign in the US, presenting itself not just as water, but as a lifestyle. It was green glass, French elegance, and elite sophistication. Ads featured models, celebrities, and cocktails with a twist of lime. Suddenly, water wasn't just something you drank, it was something you displayed. Perrier made water fashionable, and in doing so, it cracked open a market Americans didn't know they wanted, one where water could be exotic, expensive, and aspirational. This was the moment bottled water became not a necessity, but a brand. If Perrier opened the door, the 1990s blew it wide open. This was the decade bottled water went mainstream. Coca-Cola introduced Dasani. Pepsi launched Aquafina. These weren't natural springs. They were just filtered tap water, rebranded and mass-marketed. But no one seemed to mind. With smart logos and healthy-sounding names, these companies transformed water into a product with markup margins rivaling perfume. Health trends helped too. Low-calorie, zero-sugar lifestyles made bottled water seem like a smart alternative to soda. By the end of the decade, bottled water was no longer a luxury. It was a daily habit. And the companies behind it? They weren't selling hydration. They were selling trust, image, and convenience by the billion. Here's the twist that most people miss, and the industry would prefer you never ask about. Aquafina, one of the best-selling bottled waters in America, is made from tap water. Their label now states, public water source. Dasani? Same story. It's filtered municipal water, dressed up, bottled, and sold back to you at hundreds of times the cost. And yet, people believe they're buying something superior. These companies don't hide the truth entirely, but they certainly don't advertise it. The terms purified and enhanced with minerals sound high-tech, even elite. But it's marketing sleight of hand. There's no pristine glacier, no alpine spring. Just tap water, put through a filter, given a logo, and marked up for profit. But why does this work? Why do we fall for it? The answer lies in how we interpret the word pure. It's not just about cleanliness. In marketing, pure suggests virtue. Something untouched, healthy, maybe even morally superior. Bottled water isn't sold as a utility. It's sold as a choice, a lifestyle, a kind of modern virtue signal, like recycling or eating organic. The language on the bottle, clean, crisp, mineral-infused, makes you feel like you're opting into something better, not just safer, but smarter. But behind that glow of purity is a contradiction. We're paying more for a product that's often no different from what we already have, and telling ourselves we're doing the right thing. Then there's the upscale side of the game, where water becomes not just pure, but precious. Think Fiji, Evian, Voss. These aren't just drinks. They're luxury brands. Some bottles go for $5 or more, not because of what's inside, but because of what the brand represents. Fiji calls its water untouched by man. Evian markets the journey its water takes through alpine rock. Voss leans into sleek Scandinavian design. It's all packaging and prestige. These bottles aren't about hydration. They're about aspiration. And when water, the most basic human need, is positioned as an indulgence, you know marketing has reached a kind of absurd genius. So why do people keep buying it? Because it's not just about thirst. Carrying a branded water bottle, especially one from a high-end label, sends a message. It says you're health conscious, discerning, maybe even stylish. It's subtle social signaling. You could refill a reusable bottle, but that doesn't say the same thing. The right label implies status, wellness, and self-care. It taps into the health halo effect, where something looks healthy, so we assume it must be. The irony is, we rarely question the source. We just see the clean font, the translucent plastic, the confident design, and we assume, this must be better for me. By now, it's clear. Bottled water isn't just a beverage. It's a myth. A carefully engineered illusion that plays on our fears, our vanity, and our desire to do good. It's sold as purity, but it's built on deception. We've been convinced that convenience equals safety, that price equals quality, that packaging equals truth. But the truth is messier. Much of what we drink is tap water with a markup. The image we buy into is worth more than the liquid itself, and that's what makes this industry so powerful. It doesn't just sell water, it sells belief. And once you believe, you don't ask questions. You just keep buying. Every minute, over 1 million plastic water bottles are sold. That's not hyperbole. It's a staggering, ongoing reality. And while bottled water feels convenient in the moment, its long-term cost is environmental chaos. Most of these bottles are used once and thrown away. They pile up in landfills, clog rivers, and break down into microplastics that end up in oceans, wildlife, and even our own bloodstreams. Plastic doesn't biodegrade, it just gets smaller. So that bottle you sipped on during a workout, it could outlive your grandchildren. The bottled water industry depends on disposability, but it's the planet, not the companies, that's left to deal with the aftermath of our convenience. Here's the comforting idea we've all been sold. Plastic is okay, because it's recyclable. In theory, yes. In practice? Not so much. Less than 10% of plastic actually gets recycled. The rest is burned, buried, or dumped. And yet, bottled water brands love to put a little green arrow on their labels, giving consumers the illusion that they're making an eco-conscious choice. This is called greenwashing, using language and imagery to deflect blame and delay regulation. The burden of recycling is placed on the public, while corporations keep producing single-use bottles by the billions. It's a clever PR strategy. Make us feel guilty, while they stay profitable. It's easy to forget that bottled water doesn't just appear on store shelves. It's extracted, filtered, bottled, labeled, shipped, stored, and chilled, often across hundreds or even thousands of miles. That entire process consumes energy at every step. In fact, studies show it takes up to 2,000 times more energy to produce a liter of bottled water than to produce a liter of tap water. And that's not counting the fuel used for cross-country trucking or international shipping. Even vending machines and refrigerators running 24/7 add to the carbon load. All for a product that, in most places, already exists, just not in a bottle with a logo. The story bottled water tells is one of remote springs and untouched purity. The reality? Much of it is extracted from areas already facing water scarcity. Nestlé, for example, has long pumped water from drought-prone regions in California, paying just a fraction of a cent per gallon. Meanwhile, local communities face water restrictions. This isn't just bad optics. It's a system that prioritizes corporate access over public need. Even in places where water is abundant, the act of extracting and packaging it at industrial scale has environmental consequences. But the bottles never show the dry rivers or depleted aquifers, just clean, icy peaks that suggest otherwise. Perhaps the most overlooked part of this story is what's actually being sold: a public resource. Water, a basic human right, is taken from municipal or natural sources, bottled, branded, and sold back to us at a markup that can exceed 1,000 times its original cost. In many cases, companies pay tiny fees to local governments for access, then profit enormously without reinvesting in the communities they draw from. It's a quiet form of privatization, one where nature's most essential gift is turned into a commodity, and where corporations are allowed to profit from something we all depend on to live. And yet, for decades, it's been happening right under our noses. Not everyone has accepted the bottled water industry quietly. In Michigan, for example, residents of Osceola Township spent years battling Nestlé over its plan to dramatically increase groundwater extraction, paying just $200 per year to pump over 400 gallons per minute. Local communities fought back, citing environmental harm and lack of benefit to the region. Meanwhile, indigenous groups across North America have protested water extraction on or near tribal lands, calling it a continuation of resource theft and colonial disregard. These aren't isolated incidents, they're signs of growing resistance. As awareness spreads, so does the realization that bottled water often comes at someone else's expense, and some communities are no longer willing to stay silent. In many developing countries, bottled water isn't a lifestyle choice, it's a necessity. Tap water may be unreliable, untreated, or unsafe, leaving bottled options as the only viable solution for daily hydration. But there's a cruel irony. The very populations that need safe water the most often can't afford it in bottled form. In some places, bottled water costs more than gasoline. This isn't just about access, it's about inequality. The presence of bottled water doesn't solve systemic failures in infrastructure. It masks them. It creates a two-tiered system, one where the wealthy can buy safety, and the poor are left behind. Again, commodifying a human right. The bottled water industry thrives on insecurity, especially around trust in public systems. After crises like the Flint water scandal, fear of tap water skyrocketed, and bottled water sales surged. Brands didn't need to name Flint directly. They simply leaned into language like safe, pure, and clean to stoke doubt and drive sales. It's a classic fear-based strategy. Make people question what they already have, then offer a packaged solution. The irony is that bottled water isn't necessarily safer, but it feels safer because the branding tells us so. And once fear is embedded in a consumer's mind, it's hard to unlearn. Bottled water companies know this, and they use it. You might assume bottled water is more strictly regulated than tap water, but the opposite is often true. In the US, the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, monitors municipal tap water with rigorous testing and reporting standards. Bottled water, however, falls under the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, which requires less frequent testing and allows for more leniency in reporting contaminants. For example, bottled water companies aren't required to disclose their sources or test results to the public. Meanwhile, your city's water department has to publish annual reports. So while bottled water is marketed as cleaner and safer, it's often held to a lower standard. It's regulation by perception, not protection. When pressure builds, bottled water companies don't change. They rebrand. They fund recycling campaigns, launch sustainability pledges, and partner with environmental nonprofits. But many of these efforts are surface level. A bottle made with 25% recycled plastic still contributes to the other 75% of new plastic. Offsetting carbon emissions doesn't undo the energy spent on global distribution. These initiatives serve a purpose, not environmental, but reputational. They shield companies from criticism while keeping business as usual. It's a classic PR playbook. Acknowledge just enough of the problem to appear responsible, without addressing the root cause. It's not about change, it's about optics. And the strategy works, until you start asking deeper questions. Bottled water isn't just a successful product. It's one of the most profitable consumer goods on the planet. The markup is staggering. Companies pay pennies for the water itself, a few more cents for the plastic and packaging, and then sell it for $1 or more, sometimes far more. That's a profit margin that puts soda, beer, and even oil to shame. In fact, bottled water has quietly surpassed soda as the #1 packaged beverage in many countries. It's cheap to produce, easy to scale, and immune to many of the health concerns that plague sugary drinks. Shareholders love it. So do multinational conglomerates. Because behind every bottle is a product that costs almost nothing to make, and billions in return. How did we go from trusting our taps to defaulting to plastic bottles? It didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, calculated shift, driven by advertising, social cues, and fear. Brands spent decades conditioning us to associate bottled water with safety, health, and sophistication. They capitalized on every moment of doubt, from taste complaints to infrastructure failures, and positioned themselves as the cleaner, smarter option. Over time, what was once a niche luxury became a daily ritual. We stopped thinking about the source. We stopped asking questions. And in doing so, we let bottled water become the norm. Not because we needed it, but because we were sold the story so well. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The biggest obstacle to change isn't industry. It's us. We've built bottled water into our routines, our travel habits, our workouts, even our identities. Saying no to it now feels like going against convenience, against culture. But that's exactly what change requires. If we want to shift the system, we have to unlearn what we've been taught. That water needs branding, that packaging means purity, that single use is safer. It's not about guilt. It's about awareness. And once you see the illusion, the habit starts to crack. Choosing tap water in a reusable bottle isn't a downgrade. It's a quiet rebellion against an industry that counted on us never noticing. The good news is, the pushback has already begun. Cities are installing public refill stations. Schools and campuses are banning single-use bottles. Entire sports teams and music festivals now operate on bring-your-own-bottle models. And consumers, especially younger ones, are embracing reusable bottles, not just as practical tools, but as cultural statements. Hydro Flask, Nalgene, and others have turned reusables into style icons. It's not just about sustainability. It's about shifting the narrative. One where water isn't something you buy, but something you expect to have. Clean, free, and accessible. The more that expectation grows, the weaker the grip of bottled water becomes. And here's something rarely celebrated. Some tap water is not only safe, it's award-winning. New York City's tap water comes from protected reservoirs and is regularly ranked among the best in the world. San Francisco's tap water is so clean, the city has fought to keep it public and proudly promotes it as an alternative to bottled. Even in blind taste tests, tap water often matches or beats commercial brands. These aren't exceptions. They're proof that with the right investment, public systems can deliver quality water to everyone. The challenge isn't making tap better. It's helping people trust it again. And remember that water doesn't need a label to be worth drinking. Change doesn't just come from consumers. It comes from pressure. In recent years, major bottled water brands have faced growing backlash. Some universities and city governments have banned the sale of single-use plastic bottles entirely. Shareholders are demanding greater environmental transparency. Activists are calling for stricter regulations on water extraction and labeling. Campaigns like Think Outside the Bottle are reframing bottled water as a public issue, not a personal choice. The message is clear. If brands profit from public resources and environmental harm, they should be held accountable. Boycotts and bans may seem small, but they chip away at the illusion and force companies to respond. At the heart of this entire story is a simple question. What is water? A commodity to be bought and sold, or a basic human right? Bottled water treats it as the former, something you can brand, package, and price. But clean water should never be a luxury item. Around the world, people are pushing to reframe access to water as a public good, something that governments protect, not corporations exploit. This shift in thinking matters, because when water is framed as a product, access depends on ability to pay. But when it's framed as a right, access becomes non-negotiable. That's the tension. And it's one of the most urgent questions of our time. So what can you do? Really? On an individual level, the most obvious action is simple. Stop buying bottled water. Choose reusables. Trust your tap when it's safe. But the bigger impact comes when individuals push for systems to change. That means voting for infrastructure investment, supporting bans on single-use plastics, pressuring brands to disclose their sources, their practices, their real impact. It's not either or. Personal choices matter, especially when they're part of a collective shift. But real transformation happens when we connect those choices to policy, to accountability, to culture. Change starts with awareness, but it doesn't stop there. Let's step back and look at the full picture. Bottled water is sold as the safer, cleaner, more responsible choice, but that choice comes at a cost, one we don't always see. There's the environmental fallout, plastic waste, carbon emissions, and depleted water sources. There's the manipulation, turning tap water into a luxury good with a label. And there's the profit, extracted from public resources and funneled into private hands. All of this for something most of us already have at home, nearly for free. That's the real cost of convenience. Not just what's on the price tag, but what we've traded in order to believe it was worth paying for. Next time you reach for a bottle of water, pause for a second. Look at the label. Think about where it came from and what it represents. Is it truly better, or just better marketed? Beneath the sleek design and words like natural or clean might be nothing more than filtered tap water, sold back to you at 1,000 times the cost. We've been trained not to question it, but maybe it's time we did. Because water shouldn't be a brand, it shouldn't be a status symbol. It should be a right, respected, protected, and accessible. And once you start asking what's really in that bottle, it's hard to see it the same way again. Bottled water is the perfect product. Invisible cost, enormous profit, and a captive audience. But once you see through the illusion, it's hard to unsee. This isn't just about water. It's about how we're sold ideas, not things. You don't need a brand to stay hydrated. You need truth, transparency, and maybe a good reusable bottle. So the next time you see a bottle of water on a shelf, ask yourself, is it really cleaner or just cleaner looking? If this video made you rethink what you drink, consider subscribing. We explore the hidden systems behind the everyday, and we'd love to hear your voice. What's your take? Do you trust your local tap water? And what do you think it would take for society to truly shift away from bottled water? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read everyone. And if you're interested in how something as ordinary as a banana became a $120,000 art piece, and maybe a financial loophole, check out our last video. It's a wild ride through the strange world of art, money, and manufactured value.